To start this year, we were asking a question: what does it mean, or what does it look like to have a Jesus-fulfilled life? To be fully satisfied in our life with Jesus. And is there a recipe for it? Is there a list of ingredients that would go into creating that Jesus-satisfied life? And so we started taking a look at what the Bible says about that, and we found 7 different pieces to add to an ingredient list to create this Jesus-satisfied life. And we've been walking through them one at a time for the first number of weeks of the year. The first one was really simple, right? That the weekly gathering is a big deal. It was a big deal to the early church that they gathered together on the first day of the week to break bread. They took communion. They remembered the cross. They gathered together for each other. Jesus was the catalyst of that. But ultimately, what we found and discovered is that the purpose of the weekly gathering, while Jesus is the catalyst for it, for us, it's to come to this place to remember Jesus, to encourage one another. But ultimately, the goal is to be sent from the gathering back into the community. And so this idea of us gathering together creates unity. It creates a little bit of momentum. It causes us to maybe create some friction between what we read in the Bible and what we maybe are living ourselves. And so that tension can be a good thing for us to kind of bring us to a decision point of how we might change. But ultimately, we would value the 167 hours outside of what we do on a Sunday morning, and this would be the launching pad or the base camp by which we would go towards the destination. Right, so that was week 1. Week 2 was prayer. And when we started to look at prayer, we just took a look at some guys who were experts on prayer, that had been praying their entire lives, both morning and night. Like ritually, prayer was a huge part of their life. They grew up in a Jewish household, devout Jewish households, and so prayer was a big deal to them. Yet when they watched Jesus pray, it seemed like a foreign language. They looked at Jesus praying one moment and they said, "Hey, will you teach us to pray?" And surely Jesus was thinking, "Guys, we pray together all the time. I've watched you pray. You pray in the morning, you pray in the evening, you're always praying. What do you mean teach you how to pray?" But Jesus recognized that what he was doing was very different than what they were accustomed to. And it wasn't that Jesus was like saying these words that were so different. It was that the way he was praying just felt different. What they realized is that they were watching a son speak towards a father who was really listening. And that's when we begin to put together that prayer is not just words, it's not just ritual, but that prayer is about relationship. And so when his closest friends looked at him and said, "Hey, teach us how to talk to God like that," what they were really saying is, how do we have that kind of relationship with God? Week 3 is we took a look at generosity and giving. The idea that all followers of Jesus would live in an open-handed posture, that we would recognize everything we have is from God and belongs to God even while it sits in our possession. And that we should take a look, how do we make use of that in a way that honors him? We looked at the idea of being sacrificial with what we have and the call on every single one of us who follows Jesus to engage that way. Week 4, ingredient number 4. Now, in the first 3, I gave it to you, and then we went into study. This time, we're going to do it backwards, where I'm not going to tell you what it is. We're going to jump into the study, and I will see if you can find it as we get there. There's no points, by the way. You don't get to shout it out once you see it. Eventually, we'll all get there together, but that's the idea. Let me set us up for what we're going to study today. We're going to be looking at the book of Mark, and Mark chronicles a significant portion of the adult ministry of Jesus. Mark is found in the New Testament. It's the 3rd book, and so the Bible is broken into 2 distinct pieces. The first half is the Old Testament, talks about the need for Jesus, ultimately establishes the people of God, and ultimately, or eventually, gives us the full picture of why we need Jesus so much. The New Testament then talks about the birth of Jesus, the life of Jesus, teachings of Jesus, and the result of his birth, life, and teachings. So Mark is the 3rd book in that second section. And Mark gives us a very unique perspective in that he chronicles Jesus' conflict with religious leaders over and over and over again. It's almost like Mark decides, hey, if I'm going to tell you about anything, I want you to know just how many times Jesus had a run-in with religious leaders. In fact, if you look in Mark chapter 2, chapter 3, chapter 7, chapter 8, he talks about these moments when religious leaders try to trap Jesus by getting him to say something that would get him in trouble, try to bait him into some kind of behavior where they could arrest him. Over and over and over again, they try this, but every single time they fail. Eventually, they even say out loud that there's a plot to kill Jesus, and that they want to partner with some other folks disconnected from their little movement to say, hey, how do we make sure we get rid of this Jesus guy? And they say it out loud. And so Jesus and his closest followers have distanced themselves from that Jewish headquarters in Jerusalem. They've gone to cities outside of Jerusalem, and that's where they've been. That is what sets up what we're going to read here in Mark chapter 10, verse 32. They were on their way up to Jerusalem with Jesus leading the way, and the disciples were astonished while those who followed were afraid. I'm going to stop there for a second. So now they're going back to Jerusalem, even though they've been away from Jerusalem, trying to avoid the conflict. And now they're going back. And so those who are closest to Jesus are astonished that they're actually going back to Jerusalem, because they know what's waiting on him. They know that they are done, like fed up to here, sick and tired of the Jesus movement. They know that they've tried many times, and it's only a matter of time before they figure out a way to put Jesus behind bars. And so they're pursuing it, or they're pursuing Jesus. Jesus is walking towards them. He's walking into their trap. He's walking into their little HQ that they've created in Jerusalem. And so his closest friends, they're astonished, like, is this really what we're doing? Are you serious? Like we've been trying to distance ourselves to stay away from trouble, and now we're walking all the way into it. Is this really what we're getting ourselves into? Now, those who were following Jesus weren't so as close. They weren't astonished. They were afraid, because they also knew. And in their minds, they were like, this is bad. Like Jesus is walking in to the lion's den. Like, what is he doing? With Jesus leading the way, and the disciples were astonished while those who followed were afraid. Again, he took the 12 aside and told them what was going to happen. We are going up to Jerusalem, he said, and the Son of Man will be delivered over to the chief priests and the teachers of the law. They will condemn him to death and will hand him over to the Gentiles, who will mock him, spit on him, flog him, and kill him. 3 days later, he will rise. So Jesus senses the astonishment, the fear that's sitting with the people who are following him. And so he kind of stops in his tracks. He's like, hey, gather around. Hold on. Let's huddle up, everybody. Like, I get that y'all are a little bit nervous. Let me walk you through what's going to happen. We are going to Jerusalem. You're right about that. In fact, the things that are making you nervous, all those things are true. They're going to turn me over. Right? First, they're going to take me. They're going to turn me over. I'm going to be flogged and spit on and mocked, and then they're going to crucify. Like, that's what's happening. I am done. That's what's going to happen. But then he ends it with, and 3 days later, I'll rise. Now, what he didn't say is I. He uses a phrase called Son of Man. Now, Son of Man is the most popular way, or the most frequent way, that Jesus refers to himself. In fact, over and over again in Matthew, Mark, and Luke, it's a constant refrain from Jesus. It comes from a book in the Old Testament, in the prophetic portion of the Old Testament, a book called Daniel. And Daniel uses this phrase, the Son of Man, in a way that says, hey, the Son of Man is going to have a very significant movement in the people of God in the future. When Jesus steps into his role or steps into his ministry, he begins to take that title and use it for himself. And so he's putting it together for anyone who's a devout Jew who's listening to him. When he says Son of Man, they're thinking, this is Daniel's guy. The guy we've learned about, the guy we've been waiting for. This is the guy. Jesus is making good on the promises from hundreds of years ago. So Jesus says, hey, the Son of Man, he's talking about himself, will be delivered over to the chief priest, the teachers of the law. And then he even says, but they're going to condemn me, but then they're going to give me to the Gentiles, because he knew they couldn't actually kill him. And the Gentiles are going to be the one that mock him, spit on him, flog him, and eventually kill him. But he ends it again with this incredible one-liner. 3 days later, he will rise. And when I hear this, I try to put myself in their situation. When I hear them say this, I'm thinking, like, how would I respond to this? And in my heart, I want to be like, let's go. That's right. Okay, I don't like the flogging part, but I like the last line. So Jesus, I'm with you. Whatever it takes to get there and he will rise 3 days later, I'm all in. That's what I want to say. I don't know if that would have been the case. Maybe shock, maybe denial. Let's take a look at how some of his closest friends respond. So that was verse 34, right? Who will mock him, spit on him, flog him, and kill him. 3 days later, he will rise. The very next verse, verse 35, it says, then James and John, the sons of Zebedee, came to him. Teacher, they said, we want you to do for us whatever we ask. So they come to Jesus like, hey, Jesus, can we get a favor? Can we get a favor? Whatever we ask, would you be willing to just go ahead and tell me yes? Can I get a favor from you, Jesus? I ain't gonna tell you what it is yet. I need you to agree with me. It's like a 6-year-old coming, like, hey, can I get a favor? You know what I'm saying? Like, well, what is it? Well, I ain't gonna tell you that. Can you say yes first? That's what's happening here with James and John. They're grown men, by the way. They're not 6 years old. Grown men asking this. We want you to do for us whatever we ask. So Jesus is like, what you got? Verse 37. Let one of us sit at your right and the other at your left in your glory. So they hear Jesus say this, like, we're going to Jerusalem. I'm going to get handed over, flogged, spit on, mocked, killed, but I'm going to rise. And James and John actually have a pretty good reaction. They're like, and we believe. That's right. And we believe it's going to get you a throne. And on that throne, guess what? There's got to be someone to the left and to the right. Those are the places of honor. That's the places of power. And so we just want to make sure we're ahead of all the rest of them and say, hey, we believe. Any chance we can sit to your left and your right when you get this thing done? Because I know you're going to do it. We got faith, Jesus. We know you're going to do it. But once you've done it, to the left and the right, the places, the important places, any chance we can sit right there since we asked first? Like they're calling shotgun. That's what's shotgun left, shotgun right, Jesus. That's what's happening. And Jesus looks at him and says, do you think you've got what it takes to follow in my footsteps? The phrase he uses is, do you think you can drink the cup I'm going to drink? That's what he's saying, is like, you actually think you can do what I'm about to do? Now, in their minds, they're like, well, of course I can. Jesus, we're going to Jerusalem, aren't we? Jesus tells them, well, you're going to find out. But he also tells them that who sits at his left and his right is not his decision. You see, James and John, honestly, I don't fault them. And we're going to find out in a second, neither does Jesus, because Jesus is going to do a reteaching. James and John are just, honestly, they're doing what they've been taught. They live in a similar world that you and I live in, where greatness is valued. Prominence gives purpose. Honestly, where greatness is dominance. I mean, the world tells us what greatness is, doesn't it? To get noticed, to have more power, to be served, to get things your way. And if we're honest, if we take a really deep look into our own lives and the things that often cost us the most stress, it's connected to trying to protect that version of success. That most of the things that drive us nuts are attached to this idea of what it means to be successful, to be great. The other 10, when they heard what James and John were asking about, they weren't pumped. They were like, what? Are you kidding me? 41. When the 10 heard about this, so we say the 10, so there's 12 of them. Take James and John out because they already said it, so there's 10 left. When the 10 heard about this, they became indignant with James and John. Jesus called them together and said, now pause there. The reason they're upset, honestly, is not because they were like, how dare you ask such a thing right after he tells that he's going to die. Like, that's not the whole thing. They're upset that they thought of asking first. They're upset that they were like, I didn't even know we were playing yet. You know what I'm saying? Like, I didn't even know that was a thing. I didn't know I had a chance to ask those things. That's what they're upset about. So Jesus starts his reteaching. Jesus called them together and said, you know that those who are regarded as rulers of the Gentiles lord it over them, and their high officials exercise authority over them. And he stops there for a second. And so what he's trying to say is, hey, the model that you have of leadership and greatness in your life comes from the Romans, the Gentiles. And you see that vision of thrones and who sits at the left and the right. So I get why you want that. And what you see in leadership, what you see from greatness, is people who exercise their authority and lord that authority over the people that they're leading. And I get that that's your vision. There's a throne, left and right. We're going to lord over people. And he's saying, but here's the deal. I don't fault you for it because that's the expression of power, your expression of greatness that you were exposed to. That's the leadership norm that you've grown up in. It's your operational standard. But Jesus takes a moment to acknowledge that, and then he follows up with this one simple sentence: not so with you. He said, not so with you. I get this is how you've grown up. I get this is how you've been taught what power and leadership looks like, but it is not going to be that way with you. In other words, Jesus is saying, it's not going to be that way if you're going to follow me. If you are following me to Jerusalem, if you're going to be my guys, you are not going to engage in leadership, power, and greatness the way the Romans have or anyone else in your world has. We are about to do something different. And I am not okay with you taking this idea of leadership with you into kingdom ways. I'm not okay with it. It will not be so with you. Now, here's the hard part, people, is we read the story and immediately we begin to think, tell them, Jesus. Tell them. Preach, Jesus. Tell them, Jesus, how they're going to be different. Tell them how they're going to be different, Jesus. And you don't realize that Jesus is talking to us too. And then it's like, well, hold on one second. Our versions of leadership is pretty great. Are you kidding me? Are you serious? No, if Jesus stepped in, he'd tell you the same thing. You've seen how the Republicans and Democrats from Washington lord over one another. You've seen how they can't control their mouths about one another. I mean, goodness, they can't even control what they post on the internet about one another. And sometimes they ask for confirmation before you post it. They have no control. The only thing they want to do is get reelected, to have status and to have power, to have influence, and that's their goal. And Jesus would look at every single one of us and say, not so with you. Not so with you. You are going to engage with the people you have the privilege to lead differently than the rest of the way the world does. You are going to think longer about the way you treat people. You're going to think harder about what you say about people. You're going to think more intently about the things you allow other people in your presence to say about people. You are going to take the time and do things my way because, listen, I'm your leader and I'm going to Jerusalem. Why? So that they can do to me what they always do to people who threaten them. Hand them over to someone else to flog, spit, mock, and eventually kill. That's the leadership I'm giving you. The difference with me is the result of the way I'm going to serve them is I'm going to get up from it 3 days later. And so you can keep interacting with your world the way the world teaches you to interact with it in terms of power, greatness, prominence, and influence. And you can do that, but I promise you, you don't get up in 3 days once you're down. But if you do it my way, 3 days, I will rise. And then he explains it. 43. Not so with you. Instead, whoever wants to become great among you must be your servant. And whoever wants to be first must be slave of all. Did you find the ingredient? Ingredient number 4, serving. Jesus takes their known world and he flips it on its head. He takes the word greatness and he redefines it with humility. He says, greatness is not going to come by a title or position. It's going to come from something that honestly you actually do have control over. Oftentimes our titles or positions are held by someone who's leading us or attempting to lead us, and they decide if you get the title. They decide if you get the promotion. They decide if you get whatever that influence is that comes with it. And they say, no, I want to actually give you greatness that you have full control over, and it's your own humility. You don't have to ask permission. You don't need to be given a raise in humility. The truth is that you bring that to the table every single day, and that will begin to define how great you truly are as a human being. He takes the word power and brings it equality with the word service. He says, hey, your leadership model is to lord over people, and I'm trying to tell you the greatest strength you have is not to lord over someone, but to serve them. If you want to talk about power and influence, serve people. And some of you have been given an incredible gift and privilege that you work for someone who serves you more than they do lord over you. But so many of you, and I would assume the mass majority of you, do not have that privilege. That the leadership model you sit under very much feels like lordship. It is my hope that the difference in those two is that the one who serves instead of lords is a follower of Jesus that understands just how great someone can be when ego is not the thing that drives them every day, but people is. That's my hope. But you can see the difference in a workplace. You can feel the difference when someone is responsible for your day-to-day tasks and overseeing you. And the humility that comes with that is just different than what we're typically accustomed to. He takes the word leader and brings it equality with the idea of servant. Greatness and humility, power and service, leader, servant. He takes this idea of this world and he flips it upside down. But beyond that, beyond him just flipping that upside down, he also gives us a pretty incredible gift. In 45, he finishes his reteaching with this. For even the Son of Man did not come to be served, but to serve, and to give his life as a ransom for many. So if anyone ever had the right to be served, if anyone could ever throw down the card of serve me, it would be Jesus. If we do some really good Bible study, we find that Jesus wasn't just a physical human being that lived in the first third of the first century in Roman-occupied Jerusalem, that was crucified on a Roman cross. We can find that throughout history, even people outside of the Bible. That's easy for us to prove and find that there was a guy named Jesus. Now, whether he resurrected from the dead or not, whether he was a son of God, that's where we get into some faith. But the idea that there was a human being named Jesus, first century, Jerusalem, crucified on a Roman cross, it's indisputable. But beyond that, when we start to read the Bible, we find that Jesus is more than that. that he uses, that there are titles used for him like agent of creation or catalyst of creation. He's the spark, the thing that got it all started. Like God used whatever that was, the idea of Jesus, to start creating as a whole. We see Jesus as the Son of Man. We see Jesus as a figure of Savior or Messiah, someone who would give of his own life on behalf of God the Father so that we might have a right relationship with him. We find that Jesus is so significant in the story of the people of God and people outside of God that he's the very embodiment, the reason and the vision of love, where he gives his life for us on a cross. And so if anybody could say, hey, you owe me, it'll be Jesus. But Jesus says it right there in 45. He says, but I didn't come to be served. I came to serve and to give my life as a ransom for many. That word ransom is a payment that sets someone free. Jesus is saying, I'm going to pay what you can't pay so you can walk out of what you cannot escape. I'm here to serve. Jesus takes serving and he doesn't just make it a task, he makes it a purpose for living. That's different. Like I knew when we planted Foundation 8.5 years ago, I knew that that Christians as a whole, all of us, it's just so easy for us to drift into insider mentality. It's so easy. It just comes to us like second nature. And so the very first hire that I made, the very first guy on staff was a guy named Jason Walton, which I'm sure most of you have met in some capacity. Not, you should. He's a great guy. Tell him to buy you lunch. He'll do it. Not all at once. He's got to spread them out a little bit. But Jason, when he came on staff in fall of 2017, we were still months away from gathering on Sunday mornings. But I knew we had to have, and so his title is Community Outreach Pastor. I knew that we had to have community outreach, the outward focus, before we started gathering on Sundays. And it would be a mistake not to do that way. So everybody I talked to in the church planting world thought that was backwards and that we should figure out how to do Sunday mornings before we get to everything else in terms of staffing and those kind of things. But I was like, no, that's not going to be helpful to our community. We have to have a church. We have to be a church that looks out more than we look in. And so it had to be a part of our natural rhythm to be outward focused before we even had a Sunday gathering. And Jason is now 8.5 years in on that mission. And constantly people tell me when they come here, hey, we served in the community. We've been seeing you serve in the community, which is great. It's a good thing. It's a good thing to recognize that this isn't just a box we check. So one of the models that churches will kind of run with and that was pitched to us was, hey, you should do you can call it like Love Week or Serve Week, where you pick 1 week a year and you get your whole church mobilized and serving. And the first time it was pitched to me, I was like, that's the dumbest thing I've ever heard. I want our people to serve throughout the year, not 1 week a year and check a box saying, well, I did Love Week, I did Serve Week, and now I've done with that. And next year it'll be around and that'll be kind of, it's a hard week, but we get through it. And so I told Jason, I was like, hey, we can't make it easy. We got to be serving all the time. That's why the ice cream truck constantly is gone. It's why we took on mentoring in Coweta County with at-risk kids, which is every single day of the school year commitment. Like, it's a big thing. It's a consistent piece. Serving's a big deal. It's not just a task. It's a way we live. This isn't an ingredient you just add to it when it needs a little extra spice. It's a signature part of the dish you're supposed to be cooking up with your life. In other words, Jesus is trying to say serving isn't a church task. It's a gospel posture. Jesus brings serving and he elevates it to his own death on the cross. That is the good news. that we are separated from God, but because of Jesus, his death and resurrection, we have an opportunity to have a right relationship with him. So the question becomes, so what do I do? If I'm convinced that serving is important, if when you've read the Bible today, the question, whenever we do really good Bible study is, or the last question we need to ask ourselves is, if I believe this is true, what should I do this week as a result of believing that now? Because we don't want to just take in knowledge. We want knowledge to inform how we live. And so the question, I give it to you. So you've read the Bible. We've kind of walked through a moment where someone would have a definition of dominance and power and greatness, and Jesus combats that with a lifestyle of serving and even uses his own self to say, hey, I'm going to go so far with how I'm going to serve you. It's going to cost me my life. And then from that, we have a decision to make. If we believe that is true, what does it change for us? What does it change for you this week at home? Whenever we talk about serving, I think there's some pretty common lies that pop up in our minds. One of those lies when we talk about serving at home is, well, I served everybody all day. When I get home, it's my turn to be served. I get it. I understand. The truth is, home is not where you cash in your ego. Home is supposed to be the first place we practice love. This isn't easy. But if we've given our best to people that probably won't even be at our funeral and we don't have anything left for the people that will grieve us the most, I'm not sure we're actually winning at life. That feels a lot like losing. Serving at home looks like taking some initiative. It certainly involves humility, listening, and probably doing what needs to be done before you're asked. And the truth is, love is rarely convenient. Lie number 2 at home is, if I serve them, I'm rewarding bad behavior. Right? I mean, it's like, I don't want to do something nice for them. That's going to make them think what they just did was okay. See, we've turned serving back into a task. We now see our serving them as their reward, instead of our serving is just who we are. And that's a huge shift. So let me rephrase it a different way. If by nature you were a little more like Jesus, and Jesus might even say, I'm a servant, you remind me a lot like me, or a lot of me, I think you might also be a servant. Would we use that same sentence? Would we say, well, if I am like me, if I am who I am, it rewards their bad behavior? Is that a sentence we want to use? If being who you naturally are because you've given your life to Jesus and are giving everything you can to be like him every day, if that places you in moments where you would serve because it's just who you are, we would never think that. But it's because we see serving as task and not as identity. Jesus didn't see it that way. He didn't see serving as other people as something to do. He saw it as someone he is. That's why this is an ingredient of the entire picture. It's a part of the identity of the dish we're cooking up. Maybe it's at work. And maybe the lie at work is, if I serve, I'll get overlooked. The truth is, serving is not how you disappear. That's how you become trusted. And I get it. We want to be seen. We want our contributions to be valued and noted and maybe even chronicled. And so we want people to notice, especially people at work. We want people to see it because maybe that increases our value, increases our bottom line, it increases our family, like all those things. And so we start thinking, hey, if they're not going to recognize me and what I'm doing, if I'm not going to get the clout from it, is it worth it? Again, it's task-oriented thinking. That's not who you are. Those are things you're putting on a checklist. And also the truth is, In the world, power is control, but in the kingdom of God, power is influence. And influence easily comes through serving other people. Serving at work looks like taking responsibility without drama, making your team better, and encouraging people without actually needing credit. Lie number 2 at work is, well, that's not my job. Feels a little beneath me. And the truth is there really anything beneath us if it involves love in another human being? Serving doesn't erase leadership. It proves it. For those of you who are responsible for many in this room, man, it's my hope that if I were to poll the people that work for you or work under you, that they would tell me, man, he reminds me a lot about this Jesus guy that he follows. Like sometimes the way he treats us doesn't make sense, and honestly, we probably don't deserve it. But it keeps telling us that he has different standards, objectives. Home, at work. How about here? How about at Foundation? One of the biggest lies we will hear from people is, well, I am not church serving material. The truth is, serving is not for advanced followers of Jesus or mature followers of Jesus or perfect Christians. Serving is for people who have been loved by Jesus. That's it. You don't serve to earn your place. You already have a place. And it was bought and paid for a price that honestly none of us could ever even get close to. The other lie we hear so many times in our heads is, I'll serve when life slows down. And the truth is, I'll give you an insight into this, life never slows down. I talk to so many people who get rid of their children. They're empty nest, and they're like, life is about to get slow. We're about to slow things down. And all of a sudden they got a motor home and they're driving all over the country. You know what I'm saying? We are so slow now. We haven't been home in 3 months. Life doesn't slow down. The clock ticks the same at 65 as it does at 16. The truth is, you get to decide every single day what you do with the same time everybody else does. There's no such thing as finding margin. It doesn't exist. It's a lie. It's fake. You have to make margin. You have to make it. You're not going to uncover a rock and say, there's the margin I've been looking for. No. You aren't getting shorted time in your day. Our days, they're the same. You got to make margin. Truth is, serving isn't what volunteers do. It's who followers of Jesus become. This is supposed to just be part of who we are, whether it's at home or at work or at Foundation. Serving should be who we are. And when I go back, let's say 3, 4, 5 years. I think it was 2021. I think it was 2021. We did a survey. And of everyone who was attending Foundation, so it's like 5 years ago, not quite 4.5 years ago, did a survey, and what we found is 71% of the people who attended church were serving, actively serving, whether they were on a team that did stuff in the community or on Sunday mornings or both. 71%. And typically in churches, 20% of the people do 80% of the work. That was not the case with Foundation, not even close. 71% engaged in serving. Boom, that was the win. This is so good. This is so good. Fast forward, our numbers last year in terms of people who are serving, through the roof, higher than they've ever been. Hours, through the roof. Number of people engaged in serving opportunities, through the roof. However, this is what's changed. So many people have started to make foundation a part of what they're doing. And while the number of people engaging in serving has gone up, it has not proportionally gone up with the number of you who started to come to church here. And so I'm standing here on the stage today to ask you, to tell you, to implore you to say, hey, get in the game. We are not a church plant 8.5 years ago where I could get whites of the eyes with people and say, hey, we cannot be the kind of Christians that just care about Sunday morning. And in particular, you listening to me and I make you laugh. Every once in a while, the worship makes you cry and you feel like, okay, I got my little Jesus nugget and now I'm ready to go take on the world. Like that cannot be who you become. It can't be who our church becomes. So it doesn't matter to me if we broke records last year in serving. What matters to me is there are so many of you who just come and listen to me tell jokes, read the Bible, and it makes you feel better, but you do nothing about it. And it doesn't matter that we've made room for people who love Jesus but don't want to follow him. You'll figure it out some other time. We didn't make room for stagnant Christians. We made room for people who said, hey, I don't know who Jesus is, but when I figure it out, we will then encourage and implore and bring them along with us to say, all right, he's going to make a difference in our life. He's going to make a difference in our life. He's not just going to make us feel good on Sunday mornings. It blows my mind that we have 250 kids upstairs and that we don't have people having to tell people, hey, we're too full with people who work with kids. It blows my mind. It blows my mind that so many of you just come here on a Sunday and you're like, man, he was so entertaining. And you think that's what we do this for. No, there's 9-year-olds that need to know the story of Jonah and the great fish. There's 9-year-olds that need to know the story of what happened 3 days after Jesus was put in the ground. And there's 6-year-olds that need to know the story of what it was like for the guys to have fear in the boats and see Jesus walking on water. And there's 2-year-olds that need to hear from another adult other than in their family, Jesus loves you. And I get that you might not remember this conversation, but I am planting seeds that will sprout when you're 5 and 6 and 7. It blows my mind. And it shouldn't be that way. It blows my mind that Jason isn't constantly having to beat people off with a stick because there's too many of us not to increase our impact. There's too many of us. Yes, our impact is greater than it was last year, but that cannot be the measuring stick. You are the measuring stick. Your life, this is personal. It's not a theoretical thing of our church as a whole. No, it's you. The gospel's for you. Yes, it's for us, but he knows your name. He knows the number of hairs on your head. It's a gospel thing. It's not a church thing. It's a you thing. It's a me thing. And when it's a you and me thing, it becomes an us thing second level, but it starts with you. If you want to be entertained, I've got a list. It'll cost you a lot less. They've got recliners at the movies. $40, no guilt, and no ask to pick up the popcorn when you're done. But if you want to be here, you cannot be about this 1 hour and what you get out of it. It's got to be about this idea. Jesus staked his very purpose for living. I didn't come to be served. I came to serve, to give my life as a ransom for many. Who's the many? The many is me. The many is you. The many is the guys he was talking to, whites of the eyes on that dirt road headed to Jerusalem. The many was the guys who arrested him in the garden, including Judas. It was the soldier that nailed the nails in his wrists, that hoisted him on the cross, that made fun of him while he sat there, the thief on the left, the thief on the right, Joseph of Arimathea that gave him the tomb, the soldiers that guarded the tomb, Mary Magdalene the day that he resurrected from the dead, and every other person in the history of the world, a ransom for them. Serving is not something we do. It's who we are. Serving is to Jesus as breathing is to you and me. At home, at work, church. Our prayer is that each day we would take a next step towards being just like Jesus. Not kind of like Jesus, just like Jesus. So I'm not asking you to check a box and serve. I'm asking you to take a deep, long look and ask, why is this not who I am and just something I feel like I got to do? And let's solve that. Transformation is key. Task management, that's religious. No room for religious here. We are pursuing a right relationship.